Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Wargamer podcast. Yes, it's the Canadian Wargamer podcast featuring two affable and youngish granddads, Mike and James, talking about primarily miniature wargames and the occasional hex and counter excursion from Mike from our unique perspective in the Great White North. And as the strains of La Foy d'Arable die away, here are your hosts, Mike and James. Hey folks, welcome to episode 17 of the Canadian Wargamer podcast. James, how are you now?
We're all right.
Yep.
How are you guys?
Pretty good, and we're delighted to welcome tonight our Thomas Moore, who I'm trying to think of some joke, Thomas, that you probably have heard like 1,000 times before about the man for all seasons or something like that, or St. Thomas More, or
How about we just
no?
say hello, sailor?
Hello, sailor? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
Thomas, how are you?
I'm well, gentlemen. Thank you. I'm honored to be here, actually.
Ooh, honored. Okay.
Well, we're honored to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get to you in a minute, and we're going to invite you to hang out with us for the whole Wretched podcast, which may be a little bit short tonight because we're struggling with our internet connections. But I don't think we can blame that on Rogers, or we certainly can't blame that on the military. But anyway, the big news, James, that I put up on Twitter earlier today is that we passed 5,000 downloads.
Woo!
And we are very, very grateful to everybody who's done that. And just the other day too, I got a message from Miles Rita, who's one of the people behind Little Wars TV, and
Okay.
Miles was like, "Hey guys, love your podcast. We should do something together. That'd be cool." And I was like, "Oh my God, Little Wars TV likes us," So
Perfect.
yeah, well,
We're the cool kids in school now.
that was. It's been a good week. It's been a
Yeah.
good week for the Canadian Wargamer podcast. Yeah, all the cool
It is
kids
good.
like us. Yeah, so that was exciting. So yeah, onwards and upwards, and we'll do the little promo thing at the end about how you can support the Canadian Wargamer podcast. Just waving at Thomas and whoever poked their.
That was my wife, Rita.
Hi, Rita.
Hi, Rita. Glad you're on the podcast, Rita. You didn't know you were going to be a guest star, did you? So, hi, Rita. How are you?
Michael and James.
Hi, Michael. Hi,
Yeah.
James. Have
Yeah.
fun.
Okay.
All right, we won't keep Thomas too long.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're delighted, Thomas, to have you tonight, and you are, I would say probably one of the, not wanting to be overly complimentary, but I would say you're just one of the nicest guys on Twitter, on hobby Twitter. You're constantly uplifting people. I've never seen a negative tweet from you. Your posts
Oh,
are always
yeah.
interesting, and the stuff you do with Canadian military history is always fascinating. So. You may not be the St. Thomas More, but you're a darn nice guy, and we're really, really glad to have you. And you're kind of a Canadian grognard, really. You're one of the more grizzled members of our hobby, and you're out on the West Coast, so you're agreeing to meet with us 3 hours ahead of our time. So that's cool, or behind our time. Anyway.
Mine, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
welcome.
we're in the future. Thomas is still in the past.
Yeah.
We're in the future.
So we're
Okay.
waving to him from 3 hours ahead in the future.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
8 o'clock your time. It's 5 o'clock my time.
Yeah, we're in the future, and we don't even have jetpacks. They promised us jetpacks.
Right? I know.
The future's very disappointing.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm one of those kinds of people that has, I prefer to say something nice. If I have nothing nice to say, then I don't say anything at all.
Well,
That is
You know-
a great way to be in hobby social media, because I just hate it when those guys, you put something up and they pick. You know, oh, you got the facings wrong, or it's like, shut up. You know?
And the other thing is, it's your figures. And if the facings are wrong, and sometimes they run across that and they go, oh, well, who cares? There's going to be 1,000 figures on the table anyways. Who's going to know except for me? Or the one guy that goes, oh, well, those are the wrong color. Yeah, so move on.
Yeah, let's see yours.
Exactly.
Oh, you haven't painted any.
Yeah, but enough about the Facebook 7 Years War group. That's
I get it on the Napoleonic Wars group too.
it's just too painful. Yeah, those are great for the flags are in the wrong positions. I'm like, oh, yeah, and their flagpoles are too tall.
Flags upside down.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. So, you're right, Michael, because I am a grognard. I started wargaming when I was 15, and that was 49 years ago. So,
who's counting?
Yeah.
You look almost as ancient and grizzled as we do, so that's saying something.
Looking pretty youthful for someone ooh, I'm not going to do the math, but I think you're older than me. So 64. I think your skincare regime is doing really well for you.
64.
Oh, you don't look a day over 59.
Here you go.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
So,
Thomas, why don't you tell us a little bit about your bio and your wargaming bio, and if you want to, tell us some exciting stories about your time with the Royal Canadian Navy.
Well, I joined the Royal Canadian Sea Cadets back in 1970.
Hello.
Just 13. We were living in Toronto at the time, so I joined RCSCC Vanguard at HMCS York, and spent a year there with a friend of mine back then. His name was Danny Spatafor. He's the guy who said, "Why don't you join the Sea Cadets?" So I really enjoyed it. They had a 4-inch gun on the deck there at HMCS York, which kind of awed me. Oh, this is so cool, right? And hang on one sec. Rita.
Yeah, Sea Cadets get to fire guns. It's pretty cool.
You guys get to fly planes, though, or at least fly gliders.
Okay, yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
That
You've done some very cool things with your cadets, my friend.
Well, yeah. But anyway, back to Thomas.
Yeah. So yeah, and then we moved to Vancouver, so I transferred into RCC Captain Vancouver at HMCS Discovery, and I spent 5 years in the cadets. During I was a Killick, leading seaman, for those who don't know what a Killick is, and I volunteered to go on the HMCS Columbia for 6 weeks in my summer holidays. So there was 3 of us from the unit, myself, Glenn, who was a good buddy of mine back then, and Pollock, I can't remember his first name. Anyways, we spent 6 weeks on the ship just being a crew member, and you stood lookout. They transferred us from all the different departments to see what it was like. We were in ops, we were in supply, we were in the kitchen, all the rest of it. We did the whole ball of wax, right? Engine room. And the Columbia back then was built in 1959. It's now a reef along the west coast. So, but we'd have jack stays at 1 o'clock in the morning in the pounding rain, and we're out in the forecastle, and waves are crashing over and hitting the brick wall, and there's 20 of us huddled down behind there trying to stay warm while we transfer a pallet of toilet paper from one ship to the other from HMCS provider. So it was interesting. And there was another time we were doing a jack stay, and they decided to transfer anti-submarine mortar bombs from provider to us. So it was a bit rough that day. And the buffer, who's basically the chief NCO, says, okay, if this thing hits the side of the ship, we're in deep trouble. So don't let it hit the side of the ship. Of course, the ships are going like this, back and forth, and there's 40 of us on a 3-inch hawser, 4-inch hawser, hanging onto this thing, and reeling across this 500-pound mortar bomb. And of course, the ships come together right at the time the mortar bombs to come on our ship, and it swung down like this, and the buffer says, down, everybody hit the deck, and bang, hit the side of the ship. Didn't go off, otherwise it wouldn't be here.
I'm just imagining. I know the Canadian Forces were a little more loosey goosey with like getting cadets in, getting their hands dirty with doing fun stuff. But I still imagine there were some petty officers who were told by the chief, don't let these kids die or we're in trouble.
I'm sure, yeah.
You know, and they were probably just sweating every time you guys are like doing anything.
Oh yeah. Well, they kept us in pretty safe places. I mean, I spent a lot of time on lookout, simply because younger people have better eyes, I guess.
Mhm.
And you know, if you're in starboard lookout duty for a watch, and then you're in port lookout duty for a watch, and back on starboard again. So they kept us pretty busy. But I tell you, it was interesting because you had 3 big square meals a day and snacks in between, and I still lost about 10 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wish we could do that now, eh?
Wish you could do that now, exactly. But then I joined the reserves after that, HMC's Discovery, and went to the Montreal Olympics in '76 as a VIP driver for a major general in the Ugandan Army. And there was that whole deal where they had Taiwan. China didn't want Taiwan in it, so China pulled in a bunch of cards with all these different countries, and Uganda decided to pull up. At that time, Idi Amin was the guy in charge. So he called up this fellow that was the VIP. I'm not going to mention his name because he was later killed by Idi Amin. He and his whole family. I read that in the newspaper. But Idi Amin called him up and said, "You have to bring the team home." 23 members. And he told me, he says, "Well, the people put the money together. The government didn't pay me a dime to do this. The government had bake sales, and people had bake sales and car washes and all this stuff, and just donated money to bring the team of 23 members plus him to the Olympics." And he says, "I have orders to bring them home. I have no choice." And this big man, who was a major general in the Ugandan Air Force, is just tears pouring down his face because his team has to go home. Right. And that's the last I saw of him. And that was just before the Olympics started. So I wound up being a spare driver, driving all these different people. I met the defense minister for Trinidad and Tobago, spent a day with him. Such an intelligent man, right? If I could remember and record what we talked about, I was 18 at the time. I don't remember any of that, but just an amazing fellow. The New Zealanders were a lot of fun. Just, it was a good time. Went back to Esquimalt, took the signalman's course, went back to the unit. We had a chief petty officer who was in the Reg Force, and he just demobbed and joined HMCS Discovery. He was supposed to teach us signals. So we had the first class, and the next class came along, and he never showed up. Turns out he was in the Chiefs and PO's mess. So I went up to the office, and they said, "Well, you took the course last year." I said, "Yes." "You just teach all the new guys." So that's what I did. I took over the course, and I taught them everything I knew about it. And they had a ball. They went over to the course in Esquimalt that summer, and they knew everything. Didn't have to learn anything from the guy that was there. So,
oh, good on you.
It worked out. The only beef I had was that I was living with one of the best looking women in the unit. Jennifer was her name. And we met in the Naval Reserve Student Summer Training Program that summer in 1975. Anyway, we started living together in '76 and after we joined the unit. But some guy obviously didn't like me because I was with her, and he shredded all my files. So when it came for me to get promoted to Killick, there was nothing in my file. It was completely empty.
Huh.
So the unit, in their great wisdom, decided, okay, well, you're an able seaman. Actually, the Ottawa said you can be an able seaman because you spent 5 years in the cadets. They automatically gave me 1 strike, right? And because there was nothing in my file, they said, okay, you have to go back to ordinary seaman and start all over again. And I took my hat off, took my ID badge, plunked it on the desk, and walked out. Never went back.
Huh.
So that's the story of the Navy.
That's a story.
Yeah.
Oh, I was under the impression your career in the Navy was much longer.
No, it wasn't. I wish it was, but it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you quit with integrity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, saves Rita following you around from post to post for years. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, I was, I looked at joining the Reg Force. In fact, I had a chance of going to Royal Roads, but I thought about it long and hard, and I wanted to have a family, And I know full well that's really tough when you're in the
Yeah.
Navy to be away so much. And I thought, okay, no, really, that's not the life for me.
Especially, well, you're a few years older than me, and the age when we were like, certainly when I was old enough to be looking at joining, it was force reductions and incredible deployment tempos. You were away 18 months at a 24,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was terrible for family life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's gotten a lot better in the Air Forces now,
Mhm.
but back then it wasn't that great. So
Yeah.
those were the choices I made. And
Yeah.
I think I made the right
Yeah.
choice in the end of it all. So
Yeah, we would have both ended up in like the former Yugoslavia and come home with
Yeah.
a great case of PTSD.
When did the
What's that, Mike?
yeah, yeah. Well, I was just going to say I had a similar conversation with my brother Chris, who's been visiting us from Chilliwack the last few days, and he had a brief 4-year career with the Patricias in the late '70s when they were still at Work Point, and yeah, he was talking about how miserably underpaid the Canadian Forces was then, and how under resourced it was, and he doesn't regret his decision to get out at the time, but everybody makes their own decision, right, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
When did the wargaming start, Thomas?
I started wargaming at about the age 15. There was a hobby shop on West Broadway called Grand Prix Hobbies, and there was a chap in there that brought in CNC micro armor. And of course, I thought those were the next best things to sliced bread, right? Bought a bunch of them, didn't know how to paint. Really damn. Even though I painted models when I was a little kid. I mean, in the age of 6, 7, 8, there was a local store, the Black Point General Store, brought in a wire metal rack with bags of airfix airplanes and tanks and things, right? And I bought every World War I airplane I could get my hands on and painted them up. Silly me, I painted one out and put it outside in the sun to dry off, and it melted, warped itself.
Oh dear.
When you're 7, you just don't know what you're doing, right? So,
Yeah.
anyways, but we started pushing tanks around on a board on the carpet and rolling dice, and we kind of invented our own rules. And another buddy of mine, Ron Gibson, we painted up Airfix American Civil War figures, of course with enamel paints, and the barrel cracks as soon as you start moving them around. We put them on bases and rolled buckets of dice. And then there was a fellow by the name of Jack Hutchings, and he started the Trumpeter Wargames Club.
Right.
Yes.
Back always before I was probably 5 or 6 when he started it. So and I took the bus all the way out to his place, which was like an hour and a half bus ride just to get there. And he had his basement. He had 3 tables set up, and he wrote his own rules, and it was called the buckets of dice rules. Of course, he always had a bucket of dice. There's everything. He rolled 10, 15 dice at a time, and he had Boer War rules. He had American Civil War, he had Napoleonics, and a lot of them were very similar with just small changes because it was all based on the same set of rules. So Ron and I would play the American Civil War rules, which is a lot of fun. And then the Trumpeters, I was a member of the Trumpeters for many years. We would meet on Sundays at the Wise Hall. I was a treasurer for about 4 years after the previous treasurer pinched a bunch of money out of the account, which wasn't a good idea. So they wanted someone they could trust. I guess they trusted me, so I became treasurer and continued on with the Trumpeters. And that's where I met the Whiterock guys. There was a bunch of it was a convention we had in Burnaby, and I'd helped set it up. And a fellow by the name of Rick Stevens, who was about 6'5" and 240 pounds in his prime, and I was a sergeant in the riot squad of the VPD, Vancouver Police Department at the time. He eventually became a deputy chief. They put on an American Civil War game, and I guess I played well enough that they decided, okay, maybe he's a decent enough guy. He knows how to play a war game. You can join us. So I invited us to one of the Whiterock games, and that basically started it. And I would infrequently, I had another group I played with. I would infrequently go with the Whiterock group. And then I got to the point where I wanted to be with those guys and play with those guys on a regular basis. So I moved to Whiterock from Vancouver.
Wow.
I just went, okay, I want to game with those guys, so I'm going to go move out that direction. And I kept on moving further south till you got to the border where Whiterock is. And I've been here for 26 years now, I guess. And that's, you know, the Whiterock group as it stands has been together for about 30 years.
Nice.
Yeah. You know, there's been a couple of new guys that have joined.
Yeah.
Mark and Colin. Francis, who owns the largest hobby shop on the West Coast, Imperial Hobbies. He joined the group after about 10 years I was in the group. Mark's been there about 15. Colin, he's another policeman. We got a lot of policemen in the group, or ex-policemen. He joined about 12, 13 years ago, but it's been pretty steady since then. The real problem, of course, is, and it's one of the things we all talk about, is the graying of the hobby, right? It's tough. It's tough to get the young guys to join in, but we do have a new guy, Jonathan, who's just graduated from university and is a lawyer. I don't hold that against him much. Just kidding. Because we have a lot of policemen, as I say, in the group. But he's 24, which is good to have young blood, right?
Yeah.
And he's a good guy. He seems to be a pretty good gamer, and he's keen to play Napoleonics. He bought a bunch of plastics and painted them up. So he's a keener for sure. But the Whiterock group meets every Thursday. We have usually one, sometimes two games, depending. Chris Leach, whom you probably know, who's a rules writer. Yeah, he co-wrote Shaco 2.
Oh, okay.
He was also instrumental in Armadi with
right.
Name blank.
Yeah.
Artie Conliffe.
Right.
Right. So Chris has been kind of Artie's right-hand man for quite a number of years in his rule sets. So Armadi 2. I think I'm in the playtesting list on Armadi 2 and in Shaco 2. So our group, Whiterock group, playtested a lot of those. And there was going to be another set of rules that Artie was working on, but that kind of fizzled. Artie didn't want to continue on, but every now and again things come about, and Chris and he collaborate. But Chris has written Battles for Empire. It's a colonial rule set. He revised it and became Battles for Empire 2. And he wrote, he's actually writing now an American Civil War set, which we're playtesting, which is a lot of fun. It's based on the Battles for Empire. It has a similar morale and movement, but the firing's changed, and we change things around. And for instance, what is the range of muskets as opposed to a rifled musket or the smooth bore? And you know, this is one of the books I'm going to talk about later, which is this one here, The Bloody Crucible of Courage, by Brenton Osworthy, which is not a small book.
Wow.
It's quite the tune. And it's all about the American Civil War and how it was fought and the weapons they used. And one thing I did not know about rifled muskets is because they had a very low muzzle velocity. At long range, you actually had to shoot high. You had to actually aim the rifle high up so it would have a bell curve for the round itself. So you had to judge at 500 yards or 300 yards where that person was, to how high you actually rose the musket up. And some of them had leveling sights on them. And the guy had to practice a lot to actually be able to shoot and hit something at 500 yards or even 300 yards away. So that's why they continually say that there's the ranges. These guys got to about within 100 yards before they really started doing any damage, or even 50 yards. They would stand 30, 40, 50 yards away, blazing away and slaughtering each other. But the same thing with the Napoleonics, smoke. Everything is not smokeless powder. So you look at Tom, who's one of the reenactors in Ontario, and some of their reenactment battlefields, there's smoke everywhere.
Yeah.
Imagine a real battlefield with artillery banging away, and what can you see after the first 3-4 rounds anyways? So, and how is that reflected in the rule sets we play? No, you can always see the opposing side very clearly all the time, which I find very interesting.
Well, I always figure that's where your reaction, and people say, oh, well, my guy should be able to form square because, they'll see, but maybe they don't see that cavalry charging.
Exactly.
Right? And that's why you didn't pass the roll to form square.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in Shaco too, that if you try and form squares, they're what they call hasty square, right?
Yeah.
So if cavalry is within a certain distance, you roll to see if you get hasty square. If you get it, you do. If you don't, then generally speaking, you're going to lose. But
yeah.
and one of the nice things.
I was going to say, how big is the Whiterock group?
Well, we have 9 regulars,
Okay.
right? That meet every Thursday. Pretty much 9 of us. Sometimes it's only 6 or 7 of us, depending who's available that particular week. You know, life gets in the way, things like that.
Yeah.
There's another
Yes.
4 peripheral members that kind of show up every now and again. But there's also Francis, who owns the hobby shop. He has another group, a Monday night group, with about 5 or 6 guys, and sometimes we'll dovetail both groups together. So particularly if we do a World War I air game like Canvas Eagles,
Okay.
there'll be 10,
Yes.
12, 14 of us there in one game, right? Which makes it a real furball when you get 7 aircraft on both sides. Can be a lot of fun.
Those games look really cool. Love the pictures of them.
Yeah, the Canvas Eagle
Yeah.
games they're a lot of fun. They're a real blast. So
Yeah.
So this is all in the back room of a hobby shop.
no, we
On the floor of a hobby shop.
with the group itself, Francis has a table in his basement, big table that's 12 by 6, and his hobby room he's got lined with figures and books, and he's got another table set up for painting. Wednesday nights he has a painting night with all the guys. I don't do that. Chris has 2 tables. He's got a 12 by 6 and another 4 by 6. So sometimes we have 2 games and we have enough people for that night. So I'll do, say, a Cruel Seas game or a Victory at Seas game or a rapid fire reloaded game on the small table, and then an Armati or a Shaco game or something like that on the large table, right? In his basement. Rick Stevens has a beautiful games room in his basement. He's got those lawyers' cabinets with the glass doors on them. He's lining 2 walls with those, and his table's I think 11 by 6. And then there's Gene, who only games in the wintertime. He's got an 18 by 6 foot monster. So we play a lot of the big games on that.
Zoinks.
Yeah, and sometimes
That's where the big games of Shaco are happening on Gene's.
the big games of Shaco, or we'll have 2 Armati games going at the same time.
Okay, so it's very much whoever, someone will say, hey, I want to host whatever.
Yeah,
And everybody, okay, we're going to Francis' house or Gene's house.
exactly.
Oh, that's that all sounds very civilized.
Well, we have all of us are on a WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, we natter like a bunch of old women. And of course, there's a lot of jibing and things like this. For instance, one of the group bought himself about 1,000 Romans from Foundry, and behind the shield there was no elbow, so he built 1,000 elbows and glued them on it. Of course, that particular joke goes around an awful lot.
Okay, just gonna cover it with the shield, but whatever.
Yeah,
He knows they're there, so
yeah. He knows they're there. Yeah, and of course that's the joke of the group on a regular basis. So elbows, right?
Yeah, do it the right way.
There's a little AD about that. So. But,
Yeah.
We still tease one of my friends about dry brushing the lug nuts on 1 2/85th scale Humber armored cars.
Really?
Yeah. Well, he'd been dry brushing them and he just happened to pick up that detail and he was so proud of it he had to point it out to everybody. And so we just tease him. 40 years later, it's still, hey, how about those lug nuts?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, everybody gets teased about it. It's pretty normal. What's that? It goes back and forth all the time.
But this sounds great because then if one person isn't available that week, then you have somebody else's host it. You got like 3-4 games rooms to play in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can go to either one. If Chris isn't available, we'll go to Francis. If Francis isn't available, we'll go to Chris. Rick will put on a game at his place, or there's another chap who's a medical doctor in Richmond, Dennis, and he'll put on a game every now and again at Rick's place. So he'll pop in and do a game. And for instance, not this Sunday, but following Sunday, the 24th, we're going to have it's called Eric Con. Eric, who is another ex-policeman, he's now a special investigator for the BC Coroners Unit. He has a 5-acre property out in Langley. He's got horses and he's got big grassy backyard. So we get this big tent. We set up a big tent. And you've probably seen pictures of that on Twitter, right?
Right, during
and-
COVID especially.
Exactly. Yeah, we set up the tent and we have two tables or one big table, and we put on a war game in his backyard. Everybody brings coffee and donuts and stuff in the morning, and then he makes lunch, usually burgers or bratwurst sausages or something, and then he cooks up dinner for us. Usually we had chicken. He had a smoked brisket the first time, and that was amazing. So this weekend coming up, we're going to do a rapid fire reloaded game. I think we're going to do a victory at sea game. We're going to do a Fields of Glory. This is one of Chris Leach's old scenario books.
Okay.
We're going to do the Battle of Montmoral, which is this one here.
Right.
That's the Russians and the Prussians and the French.
Yeah.
Now Eric's painted up a whole bunch of French guards, so that'll be their first kick at the Cats. So.
Ooh. Oh, they're going to get butchered then.
Yeah, as always, they should.
Brand new unit.
Yeah, freshly painted unit. That's classic, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be ECW, Shaco. I forget. But then it's before games. So 2 games in the morning, 2 games in the afternoon. It's a mini convention, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Just with our group. So there'll be 9, maybe 10 of us there.
With hamburgers.
Yeah, with hamburgers, and a bevy or 2. So.
Mike, I want to move to Whiterock. Right.
I was going to say, I'm with you, buddy.
More than welcome.
And the gardening's good out in BC, so Elizabeth would like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the winters here are pretty decent. We get maybe a week, 2 weeks of snow, and that's it.
Ah, shucks.
Yeah.
As opposed to years.
Thomas, there's a lot I want to circle back to in what you were saying, but when you were talking about Chris and his scenarios, I know that he's in Manitoba, but Michael Hopper, is he sort of familiar to you?
Oh yeah. He's kind of I guess a peripheral or an outside, a Manitoba member of the Whiterock group.
Right.
The unofficial member of the Whiterock group, because he's not with us on a regular basis, but we talk to him all the time by email. He's come out to our convention here. He's gone to Enfilade down in Olympia, Washington, a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gamed with him down there. Really good guy.
Yeah.
He designs the scenarios, and we do a lot of play testing for him too, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we're hoping to have him on at some point.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a really good guy, and he's brilliant with the scenarios. I know he's got about 4 or 5 guys he games with in Winnipeg. I don't know the names of them or anything really about them. He tells us a little bit. They don't get to game that often by the sounds of it. Probably due to scheduling and who knows. But he's got some great scenarios. The only real pet peeve I have with him is that he designs the scenarios, particularly the maps, true to actually what was on the battlefield, and trying to put that on a games table sometimes can be a little tough.
Yeah.
So we tend to tailor it to what's going to work for the table, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah,
for sure.
But it's really good.
Like having the raw geographical data, and then you abstracting it yourself is maybe better than coming to a scenario where the designer's already abstracted it for you, and then you go, well, this doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I run across that too. Yeah, where the map's actually too simplified.
Yeah.
Run across.
Yeah, I was doing an historical scenario for an event at the end of May, and I looked at 2 or 3 different sources, including Google Earth, and they were all contradictory to one another. So I ended up using the map, a very simplified version of the battle from the one of the Command and Colors Napoleonic scenario books, just because it worked for the table. Mm-hmm. So maybe that was cheating, but it worked for me.
Well, it depends on the size of table you have too. If it says it's supposed to be an 8x6 and you've only got a 6x6, then
Yeah, and the scale of the figures too.
Yeah, scale of figures too. Yeah.
Well, Mike, I won that game, so you obviously did a great job.
Thank you, James. You were, yeah, it was a stunning victory for the Austrians.
It was.
I really like the fact that you guys use WhatsApp because that's one of my pet peeves with gaming groups, including sorry guys, the one that I'm involved in Barrie right now, is that we are really bad at communicating, and usually it's just sporadic emails,
Mhm,
often sent out too late to do any real planning.
mhm.
Mhm.
And I think that's just brilliant that you guys are. I could see WhatsApp or Slack being a similar sort of tool, but that you guys are communicating almost in real time. That's great.
Oh yeah, yeah. We are in real time. We can set it up and say, and I tend to be more the organizer. So I'll
Mhm.
organize not necessarily what the game will be, but who's going to be there, right? And who's available, and keep track
Yeah.
of all of that. And say, okay, who's available for this Thursday, and we got this guy, and Mark's not available, and Colin can't work because he's working, etc., etc. So we have 6 or 7 guys, which means we got to kind of tailor the game for that number of people, right? And see how that
Oh,
Mhm.
goes.
that's so nice.
Yeah,
Because having
Yeah.
been that guy trying to organize,
yeah,
Yep.
and
Yeah. It's a,
it's always playing in my basement. Um, and then you have an idea for a game, and okay, well I need like 6 people, and then only 2 can show up.
yes,
Or you have an idea for just a nice, tight little 2-person game, and
hmm
8 people show up, and it's like, oh, okay.
exactly. Yeah, and sometimes what we'll do is we'll set up a game, say that it's a Shako game or a Napoleonic game of some kind with 4 divisions, 2 aside, right? And all of a sudden we have 6 guys. So we'll just throw a couple more divisions on each side, one more division, right? Just say, okay, well, we're going to expand the scenario a little bit, we'll fudge it and get out there and play and not worry about it too much.
mm.
Yeah, as long as you've got your group obviously has the figures to do that.
Oh yeah, yeah, we've got. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of figures we have between all of us. Rick was busy selling off collections so he could buy more figures, and I bought over 1,000 Russian Napoleonics from him for like $200 because he wants them to stay in the group. I
That's
also
crazy.
bought a 350 figure Italian Wars Renaissance army
Pretty.
for $200, right? So, and they're all sitting in the locker, of course, because there's no space here where we are.
Well, yeah, yeah. Do we want to get into why they're in the locker?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, some people on Twitter would know that August 31st of last year, there was a fire in the apartment building we were living in about 11:30 at night. I was sitting in the living room listening to music with headphones on, listening to, of all things, Bismarck by Sabaton, which, when you think about it, kind of apt. Anyways,
Yeah.
well, Rita comes out and she's pulls one ear off and says, "Well, can you hear screaming?" I says, "What screaming?" And I pulled him off street and there's screaming going on in the hallway. Okay, so what's going on? I get up, open the door. The hallway's full of smoke. So I go, okay, well, how serious is this? So I start walking down the hallway to the apartment next door. The door is open. There's smoke billowing out of it. The smoke's getting thicker and thicker, and I'm thinking, okay, no, it's time to retreat. So I went back to our door, and Rita, automatic reaction, had locked the door behind me. So I knock on the door. Okay, and just down the hall is an escape door. So I go out the fire door. There's a large deck where we were. It's a 40 by 40-foot deck. Went onto the deck and back in through our sliding door where our sliding door department was. By then, she's put on a little shift and a sweater, grabbed our laptops, grabbed our accounts payable and receivable books, the schedule, that sort of stuff, all the business things, and she's on her way up the door. So I go back in, and we actually purposely put together a bug out bag with all the important papers, passports and all the documents that we need, right? And okay, where's the bug out? And I put it in one place. Unbeknownst to me, Rita stashed it away in a drawer. So I'm standing in the office going, "Where the hell's the bug out bag? Where did she put it?" And there was a few expletives in there too. So 3 or 4 minutes later, I walk back to the living room. Now the smoke's starting to pour in the living room fairly heavy. And I go, okay, well, it's time to go. What do we need? Wallet, keys, hat, coat, that sort of thing. So I grabbed about 4 or 5 coats because it was a cool evening. And by the time I got out onto the deck, the living room was full of smoke. And I could hear Rita down below because we were in the second story. There was a fire escape stairs on the outside, and I can hear her yelling my name. And I said, "That's okay. I'm here. I'm fine. Everything's all right." So we went down around to the front of the building, and by then there was flames pouring out of the apartment next door to us. I have a video of it on my phone. It's just
That's scary.
so the fire department shows up, Whiterock Fire Department, famous Whiterock Fire Department. They set up a pump for a hose, and the pump fails. So they have to dig up under the pump, and they start pouring water into it. They get the fire out pretty quickly, actually, considering all of that. But pretty much everything got smoked. So by now it's, I don't know, 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. So all of us, everybody got out okay. Even the 2 cats got out okay.
Yeah.
And they took us to a community hall. The fire department was there, and some people, and put water and some food and things, and you get a place to stay, a hotel room, whatever you need. And we'd call a friend and said, "Look, he has a full basement. Can we stay there?" She said, "Yep, sure, come on, no problem." So we got there at 3 in the morning or something, 4 in the morning. Slept. The next morning, the fire department came. We went to the apartment building. The fire department was there, and they said, "Okay, we're going to send some guys in to get stuff anything you need." So we just said, get some clothes, things like this, some basic stuff, right? So I got a few things, and lost all my Whiterock gaming shirts. We had to get new shirts because I lost all of mine. It's Whiterock gamers, right? And all my Hawaiian shirts and my Whiterock Beach beer shirt and all the things I really, really like. So all of that got tossed, and pretty much all the soft goods got tossed. All the electronics got tossed. Anything hard, because the entire apartment was smoked completely. And they brought in those aerators, I guess, to try and get rid of the smoke. And all that does is push the smoke even more deeper into what you have. So actually, the next day, the insurance adjuster came along too. So he was pretty good. But about a week later, the restoration team shows up. So the restoration team comes along, and they said, "Well, do you want to help us?" "Yeah, sure." So we put on these white suits and the respirator mask and the whole ball of wax, and we go in and we start going through things as much as possible. So what I did is fortunately, all of my figures were in the back room, and all of them are in Rubbermaid plastic tubs, right? So they're fairly airtight. And I went around to the back, grabbed the tub, took it outside, did the sniff test, and they were fine. So grabbed all the figures, pulled them out, set them aside so they were fine. Now, that particular time, I estimated my collection to be about worth $45,000 replacement value. Okay, so because I had a fair number of figures.
Yeah.
And one of the things I didn't know is that the restoration team, say you have a house, a 3-bedroom house, and that house you have, say, $200,000 of insurance on it, okay, for contents. Your collection's worth 50 grand. That's by $50,000, now you go 150. The restoration team comes in. They're going to try and salvage as much as possible if the house hasn't burnt completely, right? So however long they take comes out of your content insurance, including every box, every glove, every suit, everything they use, and all the time they spend. So for us, in 4.5 days, it cost us $20,000 for the restoration team. So imagine if your 3-bedroom house is there for 3 weeks. Now that's $60,000 out of your content insurance. So you got $60,000 restoration team, $40,000 for your collection. Now you get $100,000 left for everything else in the house.
That's
so
pretty
you got to think about when you have your insurance. Think about how much your collection is worth. Also, take pictures of it if you can. Even if it's just a picture on the table where you're playing a game, because that way you can prove you had the figures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have them in tubs or whatever, you take a picture of them, and you're actually better off to do it that way too. And try and get a reasonable amount of valuation, because replacement value for a figure you painted, opposed to buying it on eBay or from a professional painter, that figure is going to cost $2 unless it's plastics. And then you're going to pay $5 or $6 or $7 or $8 for the paint job. So now you're paying $10 for a figure. So a 2,000 figure army, right? at $10 a figure.
Yeah, that's right. Because you
Yeah.
won't. You certainly can't get the time back.
No, you're not going to get the time back, right?
No.
And if that all turns to lumps of molten lead or molten plastic, and even book collections for that matter. I mean, how many wargamers have massive book collections? Right? St. Michael's library in the back there, right?
Right.
Well, that's just the fiction collection upstairs. The Wargames library is downstairs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and this is something that I've never really thought about, but I think you're raising an issue, Thomas, that everybody in the hobby should think about is, what is my collection worth?
Mhm.
What are all the other things like my scenery, my MDF buildings, my resin buildings, my scratch built terrain, my books, my rules. What is that worth? And if my house was destroyed, would I be able to put a value on it, or as you say, to document it? I mean, those are really, really kind of frightening questions.
Mhm. Yeah. If you lose everything and you have no proof of it, you can tell
Yeah,
insurance people all you want, and are they going to believe you? They may not.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And
So you mentioned you thought your collection was worth I think you said 45,000.
yeah, about that.
And was that something you had already determined before the fire, or was that something a calculation you did afterwards?
That was just an estimate before actually the fire happened. I was thinking about it one day, and okay, well, I have this and this and this, tallied up all the figures and rough numbers, and then said, okay, replacement cost at $6 a figure or $7. I can't remember what it was, right? So
Hmm.
I think it was seven because it's $2 for the figure and $5 for paint job. Someone else is going to do it for me, right? So the value would be about $7, and that's what it came up to.
Wow.
And you
Wow.
probably could get. I mean, obviously, everybody should go talk to their insurance rep, but I think you could probably get like an extra rider on top of your, so contents of the house plus $50,000 to replace my collection.
And that's the way to do it, and have it. I know there's a company online that actually does valuations on collections. I can't remember what they're called, but I ran across them just doing a Google one day, and whether that's a valid assessment of a collection or not, it's difficult to say.
Hmm.
But they would do it, and they would charge you, I don't know, $100 for an assessment of your collection. You send pictures to them and how many, and et cetera, and they'd say, oh, it's worth this or it's worth that. But
Hmm.
a quick Google on eBay, I mean, those figures you buy out of China that are usually not very well painted, run, a 12-figure unit's $120, $130, $140, right? So you're looking at $10 a figure on average. Or
Yeah,
for instance,
yeah.
the fellows in Sri Lanka, they do a fair brisk business with figure painters or with guys' figures. And they charge, I think it's like 5 or 6 or 7, depending on if you want a tabletop single coat, just a block paint, or if you want to have some 2-layer or 3-layer Delamar method, which I tend to do. I'm a little crazy. It's, let's face it, the washes nowadays and the stuff they're using with uh, blank, the new paints,
Yeah.
the Citadels, and
Contrasts. Yeah.
yeah, inks and all the rest of it. I mean, they actually do a nice job. You block paint, splash some of that on, and you're done, right? They're on the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just finishing a unit of foundry figures, and I recently become converted to the foundry paint method, the Delamar method,
Yeah.
which is probably stupidly slow compared to what you just described. Like block paint, contrast, you're done. But it amuses me. But I was looking at these figures the other day that I've been working on off and on for a month now, and I'm almost finished them. And I thought to myself, what would be a fair price on these? Because I'm not a great painter, but I've put they're each figure is the horses and the rider is three tone layered, 3 layers, 3 tones,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm not even sure $10 a figure would do it justice,
No, probably not.
but
More like 12
then
or
I don't know who I could convince to buy them.
exactly at
I
that
wouldn't
price. But
I wouldn't sell
valuation.
them anyway.
Yeah. Thing is,
Yeah,
if you were going to have a professional painter to paint them, what would it cost
Well,
Yeah.
the thing with your very successful professional painters is they're fast,
Yes.
which is how they can still get away with charging you $6 for a nice tabletop finish and make a living at it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mhm.
And I do the Dallimore method too. I'm painting some Zouaves, some American Civil War Zouaves, and one of the things I noticed about plastics is they don't have the same kind of cuts, particularly in belts and the faces and things like that. So, and that doesn't necessarily lend itself to my style of painting for the Dallimore type method or the 3-layer. And the pantaloons are nice; they have nice deep cuts on them, but the rest of the figure really doesn't have it. There's all this trim, gold braid or whatever on the jackets, and it's like basically I have to slop on some red paint and then start painting out the details afterwards, right? And I've got a 10-0 Winsor Newton 7 series paintbrush, and I still can't get the details.
Yeah, they're more the lower relief stuff like plastics or Essex figures even. I find they're much better for like the Army Painter dip.
Yeah.
Or just an Agrax wash, something like that seems to work better with that kind of sculpting.
Exactly. Well, the front rank and the Calpe, they're the ones that I really appreciate because they have nice, deep cuts and things like that on them. So those are my two favorite figures out there.
Yeah, I haven't painted any Calpe. But yeah, certainly I know when I painted my front rank last summer, it was like those figures were just pulling me in.
Oh yeah.
They're fun. Block, and there we go. And then there was like, no, I have to highlight this tiny detail. And I was like, yeah, it was gorgeous.
They're a pleasure to paint, really.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, and that's why I don't beat myself up about. That's why I don't beat myself about taking a long time to paint a figure. Right, if I'm enjoying the ride, then yeah. And Thomas, you're a pretty gifted painter. Like I've been admiring the War of the Roses figures, the Clifford's Retinue stuff you've been showing us on Twitter the last month. Yeah. So yeah. It's really a joy to see you painting again. Did you have to replace all your paints and brushes and stuff, or were they preserved as well?
Well, at the time I was painting at the dining room table, and I managed to save a few of those. There was maybe 30 or 40 Vallejo paints and a couple of craft paints, and most of my brushes I managed to save. I threw them in a bag right away and then took them outside and we'll give them a good wash down with soap and water, and they seem to be fine. But a lot of the paints in the back room got tossed because I couldn't get to them. Restoration team were just doing their thing and toss. So fortunately, when they wrote them off, they wrote off like 100 bottles of paint at full price. So even though some of them were used and half used, et cetera. But it actually worked out pretty good that way. But there was what happened just recently is because Francis owns the hobby shop, there's been a couple of fellows pass away and they had massive collections of models and figures and all the rest. So he's been selling them off for those two gentlemen. But all the paints, they're giving away. So he brought 3 big boxes of paint. And I must have picked up 100 paints, all of them Vallejo, for nothing. So
not bad.
That kind of just placed a lot of my collection in one go there. So
yeah. Sadly, I think that's the way of the future for all of us, is that we'll be eventually our stuff will be given away, or we'll be going through some. I've told my wife Joy that if I ever fall off my twig, she used to call James, and James will be my mini executor. He'll just show up. She'll just rent a van for James, and he'll show up and take all my stuff and do with it as he wishes. So, and I'm the same with you, right, buddy?
Maybe. I plan on being buried like an Egyptian pharaoh, just surrounded by my armies.
Yeah. Or like one of those Chinese kings with an army of 1-to-1 scale figures in terracotta.
Right. That's right.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's at Enfalade, the big convention down in Olympia, Washington. There's always at least 1 or 2 estate sales every year.
Yeah.
We had one at Hot Lead, and then there was a dealer, and that's what they do, is just estate sales.
Oh, really? Okay.
And then there was another guy who was privately selling off his friend's collection. It was just
exactly. Yeah. And in a lot of instances, figure that's worth $5 or $6 going for $1.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it was sad. Like he's selling these two gorgeous Franco-Prussian war armies, foundry figures. They're beautifully painted. And it was like, oh, I want that so badly. They're just so pretty. But even at a criminal price, I couldn't afford to buy them because the armies are just that big. Like, and I wouldn't have felt right, oh, I'll give you $100 for them. It's like, no, that's like 10 cents a figure. Fuck off.
Yeah, you just can't do that. It goes against the grain.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah.
I think he's going down to Historicon. A bunch of Americans with deep pockets that'll buy that stuff. So.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So in our, you talked a little bit about the various rules that your group plays, the Whiterock guys, and it was pretty diverse. We did I don't know if you had a chance to listen to our show our last episode where we talked about Napoleonic's rules, just as an example of the proliferation of rule sets within the hobby and what makes a rule set worth looking at or not looking at or whatever. What are your go-tos and what rule sets that have come out recently are you and your friends excited by?
Honestly, we stick pretty much with Shaco 2. One of the main reasons, of course, is because Chris Leach co-wrote them. So we haven't really played anything else other than Shaco in years. We tried Blucher for a very brief period of time. That didn't go over very well with some of the guys in the group. There's problems with Shaco too. I mean, there's oddball things that we would love to change. Chris has written an errata for that, which is about 2 or 3 pages long to change a few things. There's always beefs with every rule set. And he's talked about doing a Shaco 3, but that means literally buying that rule set from Artie. And that means a cash outlay to produce another set of rules that you may or may not make your money back on. So it's the same thing when you did Battles for Empire. You had it all done up and it was a nice rule set, but he lost money on the whole thing. So it's, for him, it's more of labor of love. And it's the same with we play Armadi Ancients. Chris was fiddling around with something called Armadi Big Battles, which never really got anywhere because Artie dropped the whole. But maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'll probably get in trouble by mentioning it. But and Chris has been working on other ancient games, ancient Renaissance type game. So when we do rapid fire, we do Cruel Seas, we do Canvas Eagles, American Civil War. We played Fire and Fury, brigade level. We did Fire and Fury regimental. We tried Longstreet. Again, it was one of those card-driven things like Blucher. Sam Mustafa put out, and the whole card thing, the guys, being a bunch of old farts, they just didn't like it. There was lots of whining and complaining about that, so it didn't get very far. In fact, I have a complete, 2 card decks and a rule set for Longstreet sitting somewhere. I don't know. I think it might have made it out of fire. I don't know. There's boxes in the locker around the way. I say we have a locker about 3 minutes drive from here. It's a 10 by 10. We have all our office files and things like that there as well, so I can write it off, fortunately. But all my figures are in metal racks on both sides and inside, along with my golf clubs. That's another thing. We're kind of crazy because we wargame on Thursdays and in the summer we golf on Mondays. That way we can chat each other. Nice. We can chat each other about the gaming from the Thursday on the Monday. Not that anyone's really good golfers.
So an enviably tight-knit group you've got there.
It is. It's we've known each other for a lot of them 25 more plus years, 25 some 30 years at least. So it's you get to know each other, you know each other's habits. Andrew and I are notorious for rolling ones. We're known. I rolled 7 ones in a row with one game. Someone else rolled 11. I think it was Andrew. And of course, when Andrew and I play against each other, we always try and outwin each other. So it depends on who can roll the 2s and not the 1s. Can make for an interesting game sometimes. But some of the guys, Mark and Colin and Andrew, they like to experiment with some skirmish rule sets. There's, I think, Colin's getting into Cold War Commander 2. He likes that.
Oh yes, yeah.
Set. So he's been. I just bought some GHQ Egyptian figures. I need to paint up. They're in the queue. Once I've done the Zouaves, and I may start on those. So there's different things as far as some skirmish games, but because the group is so big, it's tough to play a skirmish game unless you have it on that small table that Chris has, because there's going to be 7, 8, 9 of us around the table. You can't really play a skirmish game, right? Even the rapid fire reloaded at Enfilade, I had 6 guys at the table, but that's because it was pretty much battalion level with almost a full battalion of armor on both sides. You can split them up. Each guy gets a company of infantry and a company of tanks, et cetera, and they can go at it, right? But a lot of these rule sets, especially, they're designed for a smaller group or just a smaller table, period. Yeah, because we have that large group, it's difficult to put on a big game. So the big games, and we've done a lot of large games. We did Wagram, that was our first big game. That was a 36-foot table with about just under 7,000 figures. Right. Oh yeah. And then I think we did Austerlitz after that. And we did Borodino, which was another monster. That was a 30-foot table with, I think it was just under 7,000 figures again.
Definitely not skirmish games.
No, not skirmish games. We've done Waterloo, I think 3 times in 28 millimeter and once in 15 millimeter, and the French always win. Yeah, they just run over the Allied army, and unless you have some really severe rules that restrict the French, they just don't make the same mistakes that Napoleon did. Yeah, as long as you don't do the same thing as he did, then you're going to clobber the Allies. That's just the way it is. Linny, we played Linny. We did that at a convention down in Enfilade. We did Linny and Waterloo on the Friday night and on the Saturday. We had 16 gamers on each side, plus 6 or 7 of us running the game. And Linny went really well, except the French lost that one. Too bad, so sad. And of course, Waterloo, on the right flank, the English decided to come off the hill and just got slaughtered.
Why would they do that? But...
Yeah, why would they do that? Anyways, some bad technical decisions in that one. But we've done some pretty big games in Napoleonics, and even in Armadi too. We had a big Roman Civil War game with probably about 3,000 Romans, about 1,500 each side.
And all your figures, from what I've seen of the photos you've shared on social media are 28 mil. Is that right?
Yeah, they're pretty much 28. Francis has a large collection of 15 mil Napoleonics and a large collection of World War II 15 mil as well. Some of the other guys have Desert War 15 mil. World War II, we game with 20 mil. But everything else is all 28s. Yeah. All of us have pretty much 25, 28s. Some of them are older figures. Gene, he's got thousands and thousands of old minifigs that he's painted up, and he's a beautiful painter. It's amazing the stuff he does, and he's still got he's I don't know how many figures he has, at least 100,000 painted, and he's probably got just as many underneath the cabinets to paint up.
Sorry, did you say 100,000?
About 100,000, yeah.
Crikey.
Chris himself probably has close to 100,000 or more. You go in his room, he's got shelves. Just, I did a quick estimate, and so you're looking at 150, 200 figures per bin, right? And he's got, I don't know, 70, 80 bins there. Plus he's got stuff in the back room. Plus he's got some of my armies. Like he's got my Greeks and my Boxers, and
I can see when your group has so many figures in a certain scale, that just becomes your center of gravity, right? It's like, why would you do anything else if you've gone so far down that road? Why would you want to start some new army and some new scale if you've got those resources to play with, right? Yeah.
Well, particularly with the Armadi armies, the Renaissance and the Ancient and the Romans, we've got as I say, it wasn't a problem to put together 3,000 Romans on one table.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, that's what the guys can do, an Normandy, Celt, and Roman game this Thursday coming up.
Hmm,
So,
But yeah, then you can
Mhm.
I guess when you're buying something to paint it, you can more think about, hey, this is really cool. I'd like to paint these guys, as opposed to, oh my God, I need another division of Russian Grenadiers.
yes, yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
That's what it does.
yeah,
you're
but
right.
you just go, well, Francis already has 5 divisions of Russian Grenadiers, so I don't need to paint them if I don't want to.
Exactly. You don't need to.
Mhm.
And it's only because
Yeah.
you feel like it's fun to do, like the Zouaves. I mean, it's fun to throw some Zouaves in my army. I've got, I don't know, 250 Union figures, maybe more.
Guys with red pants,
Yeah, guys with red pants. So just something for fun,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The thing is when we
There's a
want to
bit-
do it, they'll say, "What do you want to do? What period do you want to do? Do you want to do Italian Renaissance? Do you want to do ancients? Do you want to do Celts and Romans? Do you want to do whatever? It doesn't matter. Mongols, Chinese. Rick has 4 different Chinese armies. He's got 2 Mongol armies. Gene has 2 Mongol armies. We had a big Mongol clash one day at Gene's place.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Mongols versus Mongols. Persians, Greeks, you name it. Hittites, Sea Peoples, Egyptians.
Would it be shorter to list what you don't have?
Essentially, yeah, it is. Short of list what we don't have.
Cavemen?
Yeah.
It's very, no cavemen, yeah.
Okay.
Or there's no none of those the teddy bear wars.
Oh, right.
There's an oversight.
Yeah, no teddy bear.
I haven't heard zombies or pirates or cowboys either.
We have cowboys. Mark has cowboys. He's got a gunfight,
Oh, wow.
gunfight game. So yeah,
Yeah.
we do that.
And you can do that with, like you could do a cowboy game with 18 people around the table.
Oh yeah,
Here's
Yes,
your
yeah.
character.
yeah.
Well, and when he dies, well, you get a new character and start at the end of the table.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we've done that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, when you were talking earlier about skirmish games being played by large numbers of players, I was thinking, James, of your gangster games, which work pretty well if you've got a whole pile of factions.
And that's why I designed it that way, exactly for those occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I need to come up with a different scenario. I think everybody's sick of looking for the golden teapot of Petra.
I don't think anybody looks for anything, James. I think everybody just shoots everybody else.
They were
Really.
the last time I ran it at Rick's birthday, they were looking for it. There was actually searching under boxes. People were actually in the warehouse, and then there was more gunfire, and people died in the warehouse. But,
okay. Well, yeah.
Sounds like a fun game.
Oh, I thought
it was.
Everybody laughed.
Yeah.
Nice and yeah.
Yeah, the James Gangster games look great. He's got lots of table scatter, and the figures are awesome. And
Well, thank you.
And
by the way, speaking of that sort of thing, I just jumped on Bob Murch's pre-order for his latest set of figures. Yeah.
Bob,
I don't even know actually what I'm getting. I know there's some, crazy ladies like dressed as explorers or Cthulhu investigators or whatever. Anytime Bob comes out with new stuff, I buy it.
Bob he's a great guy. He's a good guy too.
Just figure out what to do with it later. Yeah.
He comes to convention here on a regular basis, and he goes to an awful lot. He was down there this year.
Yeah.
Where 3 of us picked up COVID.
Oh.
He left a big hole when he moved from here to out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to move out there too. After having heard about, I'm going to move to Whiterock. I think. Oh, wait a minute. No, I can't. I started a new job. Sorry. So this is the part of the podcast normally where we do something called the Canadian Content Corner, and James and I sometimes debate, well, isn't the whole podcast Canadian? And yes and no and yes. But anyway, so there's usually some music. Thomas, seeing as you are still with us, and you do a kind of a really interesting social media project by sharing pictures primarily of the Second World War, Canadian pictures. Do you want to talk about that a bit? What got you started in that? Where do you get the photos from? What sort of things do you choose and why?
I what I try and do is first off, I found them at the library and our Canadian Library and Archives. There's a specific section you have to go to. It takes a while to actually get to that particular section. I ran across it kind of by accident. Well, these are cool pictures. I'll just post them on Twitter. Just as an interesting thing to do because I'm interested in Canadian history. I'm interested in the Canadian military. I've read a lot of books about Canadian campaign in Normandy and up through Holland and into the Rhineland and right till the end of the war. I've read Terry Cobb. I read Mike Bestrol's books. I read you name it, all kinds. Zukol's. So and compared a lot of them as well. And for me, it's a very what the Canadians did there, particularly in Belgium and in Holland, is it's beyond heroic. It really is. I mean, what those guys did, punching their way through the Germans, trying to liberate the Dutch, and afterwards literally bringing in food to help feed the Dutch because they were eating nothing but tulips and grass and whatever else to get their hands on, right? Bringing in food for them. I mean, they were liberators, but also saviors. And any Canadian knows that when you go to Holland, because the Dutch you're from Canada? Oh, yeah, can't do enough for you. And you see pictures of the little girls busy, putting flowers on the Canadian graves every year. So to me, that's something that needs to be honored, needs to be celebrated. It needs to be told. And a lot of people don't really know what the Canadians did. They don't really get that sometimes. Some Americans do, the Brits maybe a little bit more, but even Canadians don't know, particularly the younger generations. They don't understand exactly what Canada did. And for me, it's part of it. Okay, I've got this. I got all these pictures. There's I don't know how many there's lots of them. There's Royal Canadian Navy, Air Force, there's Army, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll do a theme. Like for instance, I'll type in Sherman, and it'll bring up all the pictures of Sherman tanks, and I'll go through those and see what we have. I typed in infantry, and infantry, or I'll target one particular regiment, like the Westminster Regiment, and I'll find different pictures of the Westminster Regiment. And recently, I typed in medic, so now I'm getting all the pictures with medics in it, right, or medical. So, and then you have the description of what it is. And one of the things that a pet peeve of the library and archives I have is not a lot of them, but a number of the captions are wrong. Yeah. For instance, there's a famous one of a Panther turret that's encased, it's on the concrete base. And they're saying it's a 75 millimeter anti-tank gun. Well, no, it isn't. It's a Panther turret. And they have a little comment section so you can actually, suggest an edit. And I always put in an edit, but never gets changed. It's a pet peeve of mine. So, but that's the reason why I do it. So the people will see that and it gets spread. And what it does is it celebrates what those men, those ladies did. Because there were so many women nurses and, the pilots that were flying aircraft over to England from Canada, their contribution. My mother was a Wren in the Navy.
Northern Ireland. Sake.
Yeah. She was in Northern Ireland, joined the Wrens when she was 18 or 19 years old, met her first husband, who was a Canadian, who hopped a boat in 39 and joined the RAF, became a bomber pilot, was flying Wellingtons in the desert with 221 Squadron, then he was in Iceland for a while. Supposedly he was credited for sinking a German submarine, which he won the DFC for. And then he got transferred to Transport Command. He was flying, he liked the Wellington, he did not like the Hudson. The Hudson he found was a difficult airplane to fly. And I found out later on it had a nasty habit of stalling and going into a spin with landing gear down and full flaps on. Oof. It was a flaw in the design itself. So, and that's exactly what happened. He had a bunch of senior Canadian officers, and I think an English officer, an admiral in there, and some generals, 7 or 9 of them, I can't remember, flying into Chivener because it was in bad weather. And he came in for a landing and stalled and spun in, and everybody died. My mother they'd been married 6 months. She was 3 months pregnant with my older brother when he was killed, Gordon Leslie McIntyre. So of course, she got demobbed because she was pregnant. She got out of the Wrens, went back to Northern Ireland. I had my older brother, who's passed away a year ago, February. He's 14 years older than I am. So that's that whole thing. This is the military part in my family. So I kind of documented his life and get a bunch of information. Same as Rita's dad, who was he got drafted in the German army in 1940, I think. Um, he joined a security division, 281st Security Division, 396 Regiment, sent to Russia. He was killed outside Veliki Luki in 1943, if I remember right, October the 29th or something, at the Battle of Newell. Got hit by some fragments, and he was taken back to Battalion 8 Station. And back then they gave him a little card that says, tick off the boxes. I'm dying. I love you, et cetera, et cetera. And this came in a package from Germany. I wrote to Germany for his records, and this actually came along with a letter from Hauptmann Langfeld with a letter about her grandfather, saying he was a good soldier, came from Cologne, helped with troops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's a gay freighter, corporal, and all this information came, but there's this particular card that he filled out still had bloodstains on it.
Oh,
But he
goodness.
filled it out, and it was sent to Rita's mom, or Rita's grandmother, Nellie, and all that information came through. And then I found out where he was buried. So Rita's mom, who was like 5 or 6 at the time, and they'd been shipped off to Austria because Cologne was getting hammered by the bomber command.
Right.
Rita's mom hopped an airplane 2 weeks later. She was in an airplane to Russia. Found his grave. They got into a bus with a bunch of other German people drinking vodka, singing songs, and everybody got out at the grave site because the Germans and the Russians had collaborated, taken all these bodies from graveyards all over Russia and put them in communal graves, right? So that people could go there. And she said it was beautiful, trees and grass. It was well taken care of. And the Bundes, not the Bundeswehr, but the Bundes, I can't remember the actual term, they take care of them just like the Wargames Commission, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wargames Commission.
Yeah.
So it's
astonishing.
interesting, her grandfather was German, my family was on the Allied side. And, you got to think, some poor schmuck who worked at basically it was a muggy plant. He was a cook in the muggy plant, and he wound up being a cook in the division he was in. But somehow he wound up in the front line. I haven't been able to put that together because he wanted an Iron Cross second class and a close combat infantry class and a wound badge and all that stuff. So how does a cook get that? And it kind of puzzled me.
Russian front was nasty.
It was nasty.
Yeah. Maybe he was needed and was never sent back to his old trade. I don't know.
No, I guess
I'm gonna try to.
Dirty.
I'm just gonna try to do something here, seeing as this is also being recorded for YouTube. So, does this? Can you? This is one of your tweets, Thomas. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
So this is from your Twitter feed for today, and I'm really struck by this image. Like you talked earlier about men and women. So this is a Canadian military doctor and anesthetist. Anesthetist. Yeah, that's an extraordinary photo. I'd never seen that photo before, and that's sort of typical of your Twitter feed. So if anybody, I'll put a link to in the show notes. I'll include your Twitter handle, but really encourage people to really encourage people to follow you, because those sorts of images are, sometimes they're well-known photographs and sometimes they're ones I've never seen before.
Yeah. There was, I think it was last year sometime, or maybe it was early this year, I can't remember. They found a bunch of pictures of the Bren gun factory in Ontario, and put them all together, them all right. So it was all women, right? Busy building the Bren guns, which I found very interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Speaking of Canadian history, I just wanted to flag a couple other things before we wrap up this segment. So, and Thomas, this might speak to you as well with your, talking about our heritage. Let me see if I can just find it here quickly. Yeah, so this guy, Private John Lambert, I don't know if you guys were following this, but he was a Newfoundland guy who his body was discovered in 2016 and was positively identified, and was reburied quite recently. When was he reburied? He was reburied, I think, in late June. And there were 30 June 2022. And there were a number of guys from the Royal Newfoundland Regiment that were sent over for his burial. And I just found out about that from following a woman called Dr. Sarah Lockyer, who's a forensic anthropologist who does a lot of work for the Commonwealth Wargames Commission. And so her Twitter account is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
And
she posts a lot of really interesting things.
yeah, and she was also involved as well in the burial of an unidentified member of the 5th Canadian Mounted Rifles, who, along with some British guys, was buried at the cemetery at Lewes. So, and then the other thing that you guys may have been tracking was the apology to the ancestors of the Number 2 Service Battalion, which was the African Canadian battalion that was used basically for manual labor because they weren't allowed to fight. Right. And I just came across a remarkable image which was shared by the Canadian Forces Base Halifax. These are currently serving members whose ancestors served in Number 2 Construction Battalion, which I think is quite extraordinary. And one of them is a young petty officer. That's her top left here, Lisa Ogunya. And she spoke recently at a service for, or a ceremony just before the national apology that the Prime Minister took part in. And a number of reenactors from that group took part in the recent Halifax tattoos. So I'll put that in the notes as well. So
that's very cool. I didn't see that one. I missed it. But if you Google it, there's an excellent article written in Legion magazine about the Number 2 Construction Battalion. So if you want to do a Google and Legion and Number 2 Construction, it'll show up. Okay,
I'll look for that and put that in the notes. Yeah, lots of stuff happening in Canadian military history right now. So, yeah. Well, this is getting to the point where we start wrapping up, and again, we've really enjoyed having you, Thomas. This is the point where we ask our guests to contribute a couple of books to our digital library, and we, of course, as I've said before, I've totally ripped this off from Sean from the God's Own Scale podcast. So thanks, Sean. What have you got for us, Thomas?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was Bloody Crucible of Courage by Brenton Osworthy. It's very technical about the American Civil War, but that period with rifled muskets and smoothbore muskets, and he goes into the various artillery pieces, smoothbore versus rifled, et cetera, and even into the naval actions and the sieges and things like that. It's an excellent text for anybody interested in that period. He's also written one on the Napoleonic period, which is running around $50, and I'm going, but eventually I may break down and buy it anyway. So if my birthday comes around, I can buy that and read through that. But again, it's big. The Napoleonic one is even bigger than this one, so it's not an easy read. One of my favorite books to come out is recently, of course, is James Holland Brothers in Arms.
Oh yeah, that's definitely on my list of books to read. How is it?
It's excellent. It's I read there's 3 books. There's the Colonel Christopherson. He wrote his book, and then there was oh man, I'm bad with names. One of the troop commanders, 2 of them actually. Both of them, they wrote books. So I read all those 3 books, but a lot of those are in here. So you don't have to read all those 3 books because a lot of it is in here. It's like, and when I came back to this, it was like old family. It's okay. I read those other 3 books, and it's all right here again, right?
Oh goodness.
Actually, I created a scenario from one of the battles he was in, the Battle of Kevelberg, for Rapid Fire Reloaded. So I'll design scenarios around things I read. In a history book, what's this about? The Battle of Cisteron, I did the same thing with that. That was an operation during Black Hawk. That's that winter World War II game that I put together, and that's a lot of fun. But it's an excellent book.
Oh, that's the one with the winter. That's the one with the winter battlefield, right?
That's the winter battlefield. Yeah.
I love that. I love that table.
Yeah, they're both done in winter.
Yeah. Whenever you show photos of that table, I always get chills. That makes me feel good.
It just shows how crazy I'm drilling out matchsticks to put barbed wire through. But the level of insanity that goes with the game.
Well, it comes with the course. Yeah. No, that's great. And those sorts of games are so much more interesting than just, 1,000 points aside, have at it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes, well, with a lot of it, if you're creating a scenario from history, you have to tweak it so it'll actually be a decent game.
Yeah.
For instance, the Battle of Cisteron, the 5th Queen Zone Rifles took the first row of houses in Cisteron. The Germans counterattacked with a full battalion and tanks and SP guns, right? So in game terms, they just get overrun. The British get overrun. So the British tanks showed up later, about 2 or 3 hours later. So what I did is I just brought them in turn 2. So at least the British infantry have a bit of a chance, right? So it's you're fudging a little bit, but it works, and that's the key point. Now, that's the third one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I picked this up at a used bookstore recently. Strangely enough, it was owned by the U.S. Army, which had never been read.
Right. No surprise.
There's a library card in the back with nothing on it, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, what a surprise.
I'm not quite finished yet. My old cap tally is a bookmark.
Oh goodness, look at that. Oh.
And but it's very interesting because it goes into the early war, in between war years, and the senior officers that were coming up through the ranks of Creer and Simons and all the rest of it, and what they were doing, what they weren't doing, how they were dovetailing with the British Army, how they created a college in Canada for senior officers, and how well that did. And they realized, of course, that the senior officer course in Canada wasn't as good as the one in England, and they tried to get more guys in England as often as possible. But he details the mistakes that are made by the Canadians, right? Especially senior command. And there's actually one other book, 21 Days in Normandy, and it's about the 4th Canadian Armored Division. There's a chap, I can't remember his name, he's wrote it Canadian, and it talks about their attack. And it was so narrow, they only had 800 yards for a full division to advance in. And this is that's basically a squadron size, right? So how can a full division advance? And right at the beginning, within the first day, the first armored brigade, the brigadier was wounded and basically taken out of action. And they couldn't find this replacement for another 3 hours, so chain of command kind of fell apart. But this was Simon's idea of moving forward. He wanted to have a big panzer wedge with infantry to punch their way through. The theory with that is okay, but the problem is now the Germans shift troops firing from the flanks, both sides. All those guys that are unoccupied doing nothing now are shooting at that column, and they can shift troops from those flanks in behind the troops that are already there, so put in a layered defense. And that makes it very tough. So you kind of look at what Simons did early on and look at what Simons did later. He learned. It took him a while to get there, but eventually that's it there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's a very good book, actually. Yeah. Worthwhile reading.
I'll put it in our show notes. Angelo Caravaggio's book, yeah.
Yeah, he's Caravaggio. He's not too hot on Simons. And oddly enough, this guy he likes Simons, which I found very interesting. John English, right?
Yeah.
He says that Simons was a real detailed guy. Everything had to be perfect the way it was supposed to be. He was very much like Monty, modeled himself after Monty, but very much a nitpicker and a controller too, where he would actually give details to each brigadier what they're supposed to do instead of letting the divisional commander do what they're supposed to do, which is pass on the orders.
Yeah, there's a lot of strong feelings pro and against him for sure. And if you put 6 Canadian Normandy historians in a room, you'll probably, depending on their vintage, you'll probably get 6 different opinions for sure.
7.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those are the big books that
Sorry, James, what was that?
Oh, you'll if you have 6 historians, you'll get 7 opinions.
Probably, yeah.
Ferrer versus
Yeah. His book on Dieppe and Enigma was just fascinating, and
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
totally opened up my eyes about Dieppe for sure. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of books, I am currently working my way through this book, Canadians Under Fire: Military Infantry Effectiveness in the Second World War by Robert Engen, and we're hoping to have him as our guest in
Oh,
our August podcast.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so I'm just trying to confirm that he's in the process of relocating to work with the Australian Defence Academy in Canberra, but he's still in Canada waiting for his visa. So
nice work.
hopefully we'll get him on the podcast in August. Yeah,
That'd
exactly.
be a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a well-published historian. He's done a lot of stuff on professional military education, wargaming and education.
Mm.
And I saw, James, in your Twitter feed, you've got Henry Hyde's book.
Yes.
Yes, it's a massive
I
book.
started reading it. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not going with me to work to read at lunchtime. It's just too heavy.
No,
You know, you're trying to read it in bed and it's like, your wrists break sitting up and
yeah,
it's,
or it falls on your face as you start to get sleepy, and
yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
exactly.
weight home.
yeah.
It's chock full of great ideas
Oh yeah, it's a lovely book and well worth waiting
and
for sure.
very, very little eye candy.
Mm,
I was expecting, a lot of color pictures and, gaming porn, like become accustomed to, and there's very little of that. It's very
Hmm.
dense pages of writing. So,
yeah,
it's worth the money. You're not getting fluff.
no, it's a
You're
great
getting
point.
good.
Yeah, we're very grateful to you, Henry, and I look forward to engaging with it myself. And yeah, it's a great tool.
Henry's
So
good.
yeah, Henry's a great guy, and yeah, we'd love to talk to him at some point. So just last few minutes wrapping up. Thomas, you're a guest. What are you working on right now? You're working on Zouaves?
Henry and Zouaves. I just finished a unit for my War of the Roses army. I did some quickly painted up some dismounted knights, men at arms, and I've got like finished off some wagons just recently, some supply wagons
Wagons
for
are great.
the War of the Roses, front rank,
Yeah.
of course.
Oh, nice.
Painted all those up,
Oh.
and then yeah, that's basically when I finished off my crossbow, because after the fire, we didn't really have space to paint. So after the first month in September after the fire, we moved 6 times,
Yeah.
no, 5 times, and then we finally found a spot that was semi-permanent, the top floor of a house that was freezing most of the time all winter, and paint would probably freeze if I tried to paint. But there just wasn't space there to paint, so I didn't really get painting again until we found this spot here. We're in South Surrey, so got my little table set up, and I got my paint rack, and bought a paint rack on Amazon. I got my lights, and off we go.
Nice. I'm so glad to see you back in action. Yeah. What rules are you going to use for those War of the Roses guys?
We used well, we used. I'll go back to that Armati. We used Armati, and for the larger game, we actually did Armati Big Battles, which is this experimental rule set that Chris and Artie were working on, which never really came to fruition. But we just played in our group, so which is a lot of fun. It's different, and it separates it into a different type, because Armati 2 is a tournament game. It
Okay.
really is, 150 points your side and blah, 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 and then off you go, right? So, and it plays like a tournament game. It has some oddball things in it. For instance, if a unit breaks off, now you have this one single unit can run around the table and do whatever it wants. And in Ancients or in Renaissance, that just never happened, right?
No.
So
No.
Little gamey.
it's
Yeah.
a little gamey, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fun. And that's the thing. You can throw figures on a table, play a game in an hour and a half, you're done, right?
Well, there you go. That's at some point it's all about playing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you've got Tom Egan from the well-known Twitter Irish Wargamer coming over at some point soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's supposed to be coming to Vancouver to visit his brother. So
Yeah.
if I can convince him to come out to Whiterock and have a Thursday night game with the crew, I'm sure he'd love that.
Oh, I'm sure he'll be there for sure. So
He'd be more than welcome to come and join the group.
well, that would be grand. I look forward to hearing about that.
We have another chap in the group who's from Dublin, Mark. Mark McDonald. So he would, I'm sure the two of them would have chew the fat about Ireland and things like that. So.
Sorry, what was the name again? I missed the part of that.
Mark McDonald. He's one of our group. He's from Dublin.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
He and Tom Egan would have a few things to chat about.
Oh, you wouldn't get a word in edgewise, I'm sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
McGinnis would be
James, what are you working on right now?
Prussians. I am working on wave 2 of my Napoleonic Prussians. We Scott and I had a big game of General d'Armée, and that reinvigorated me into Napoleonic. So I assembled 2 boxes of periplastics, which has given me six roughly battalion-sized batches.
Mm-hmm. Lovely work too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Very nice.
And hopefully all 6. Hopefully the rest of them will turn out the same way.
Wow. And what are you doing with all those Austrians? Have you decided?
I'm going to start out small, like just do a force for sharp practice, and then see where I go from there. Which will probably mean I'm going to end up painting all of them, and have another army for General d'Armée. So, that's like phase 5 of my big plan, I think now, which will mean I'd have to buy more cavalry for them and artillery, because I don't have any artillery for them. So yeah, doom. I'm just hearing doom. Doom.
You can never have enough Prussians.
Doomy doom.
No, you are doomed, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, because I've still got a pile of Russians to paint.
Napoleonics are a deep dark hole.
Oh yeah, well, people keep throwing, hey, here's another Napoleonic army for you. Boom. And it's like,
yeah, I'm having trouble feeling sorry for you, mate. I'm sorry.
Like, thank you for the free figures, but
yeah.
and I'm weak and I can't just say, oh no, I'll put them in the bring them by and donate the money to charity or something. I'm weak. I'm a whore for figure, and so and Austrians are nice.
They are nice. And they're easy to paint. It's just white. Yeah.
I wish people wouldn't say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said it.
That is bull. People, oh, you're just going to spray paint them? It's like, no. Are you going to spray paint your American Civil War guys just blue? No.
All right.
No.
White is a very demanding color, Michael.
It is.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, if like that, and that, I think that white and yellow really separate the good painter, like the really good painters, from the rest of us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
Like if I'm at a painting competition, you see something that's like white, it's like look at the shading on that, and it's just like, show me your white stuff, and I will, like it's very easy to get highlights and contrast and stuff with red and blue and gray, but white is very difficult to be subtle with.
Yeah, and it's for white. I used to use the gray as a base. Now I use yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I use like almost a pigskin color for the first color. Then I do a yellowish buff for the second color, and then cream for the third color.
That's very clever.
I keep that in mind.
Huh. I'm gonna have to revisit that idea. I apologize to you, James. I paint white figures in 6mm, so my time spent on them is a little bit less.
Well, yeah, you're just kind of picking up faces and shakos, and there you go, you're done.
Well,
so Rita just pointed out to me that I forgot that during the fire I lost all my rivers and hills and stuff like that. So there's a fellow down in the States named Joe who does Wargamer's terrain.
Oh yes.
And he
that's a very pretty hill.
Did some hills for me, and he shipped it to me, and this is the box it came in.
Oh, nice. Wargamer's terrain. Okay.
Yeah. And they're wrapped. Each one's wrapped in tissue. So, and he's got Give you tissue paper here, and that's the river section there,
Ooh, that's lovely.
right? And it's flexible,
Oh,
so you can lay it on top of hills or wherever you want to do it. And he actually takes mineral oil and puts it on top of the river itself to keep it shiny. So he says every now and again, get some mineral oil and just shine it up a bit.
Oh, it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
how are
And-
his prices?
This was about $140 for about 12 feet.
Okay.
So it's not bad. You know, the hills were, I think, about 10 or 15 bucks a piece.
That's nice.
So, you know, all in all, I had these mill streams from Limax, and they were running around $60 a piece. I had 3 of them. So pretty much the insurance covered all of that.
And it's
So,
called Wargames Terrain?
Wargames Terrain, yeah. It's called Wargamers Terrain.
Well, Wargamers Terrain.
Wargamers
Oh, I
Terrain.
see.
Wargamersterrain.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's in the States. How's the shipping?
He's a one-man guy, does it in the basement, you know, and his communication was amazing. He says, I'm going to start your project next week. You know, I'm going to do the rivers. And he says, halfway through the rivers, and I've done the rivers, going to do the hills now. And then he sent me a tracking number with the shipment and all the rest of it. So
There we
there
go.
it is. Yep.
Wargamer Terrain, yeah.
How is his shipping rate?
Excellent.
Joe Linares. Okay.
Some American businesses, unfortunately, their shipping is just terrible because
Yeah. We packed it really well. There was, you know, those airbags that went all the way around the outside of it. This box is nicely cushioned inside, came with in perfect condition. And he sent me an email. He says, if there's anything wrong with the box, he said, make sure you take pictures of it and note it and et cetera, et cetera. But it was in great shape.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be getting some orders from Canada.
Well, I'll make sure that the link to that is in our show
That's
notes
what we're
as
here
well.
for.
Yep. That's what we're here for.
Mhm.
All right, gentlemen. I'm not going to say anything about what I'm working on except it's Foundry Prussian Dragoons almost done, and then I think it'll be a 15 millimeter DBA army, and I just have to choose Sea Peoples, New Kingdom Egyptians, or Assyrians. I haven't decided yet. So,
Got to go with the Assyrians. They're the winners.
well, they are the powerhouse army, but
Yeah, they are.
You know, you got all that nice bronze scale armor, the big pointy helmets.
yes, yeah.
4 horse.
I finally got a chance to put my early Hebrew DBA army on the table, and I'm 0 for 3. It's a terrible army, but yeah. Anyway,
They're just wearing T-shirts with pointy sticks.
yeah, exactly.
You
But I
know?
do have an Ark of the Covenant on order, so that'll hopefully juice my early Hebrews. In.
Yeah,
I'll just open it halfway through the battle. I'll open it. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I will, as we say goodbye, I just wanted to say that the Canadian Wargamer podcast is a labor of love. We never ask you for money. We just ask you for your ears, and we ask you to tell other people about it. So thank you to everybody who listened. 5,000 downloads. So grateful. Here's to the next 5,000. Thank you again, Thomas, and good night to all of you. Good night, James.
And good night to all our ships at sea and listeners
There you
across the land.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.